Tell us about the Madrigal Project.
How far back do you want me to go?
Well, we've got a little wager.
We have a little time.
Tell us about the Madrigal Project.
Well, okay, so in the summer of 1977, and we wrote, I think it was about a 17 and a half, 18-minute piece of music. We got our start. We were just kids. I was 18, heavily influenced by Genesis and Von der Graaf Generator and Peter Hamel. And so we started out doing all original music. And then through circumstances as they were at that time, we all had to make a living, and so we began playing covers. We were a cover band called Uvu. We ended up doing the cover scene for quite a while, and it wasn't until the early 80s that we decided to do some of the original music that I'd been writing and that we had been writing. And I signed a bad deal, and the music got basically kind of commandeered from us. But to the best that I know, the first two Madrigal albums did well in Europe. Because I think the second record was really the start of Madrigal proper as a band, because we were writing together. You started out as an original band, but then we ended up becoming a cover band. But we played progressive rock covers at a time when it was probably the most unpopular thing you could possibly be doing. It was a strange time. It was probably the worst time that you could come out as a prog band. And I remember actually meeting John Poneman from Sub Pop and driving around Seattle, playing the first album, the Waiting album. And he was real quiet, and we're driving around and we're listening to songs, and he just pulled the car when he goes, this is about as far away from anything that I want to have anything to do with at all. This is like, you're kind of waving the banner, the flag that we're out to destroy. Anyway, so in 1994, my second daughter was born, and she was born with Rett syndrome, which is a neurological disorder. About 18 months, she developed seizures, and she started to regress and losing speech. And that was right at the precipice of when I was getting serious about a career in music, and I was going to go to any one of the meccas, New York, LA, Nashville, wherever, and try to get my career really going. But when this happened, I had to learn right away that the world doesn't revolve around me anymore. I ended up having to kind of replan my whole approach to what I was doing. Along came this little cover band called Men in the Making, which was a bunch of young guys, right? And I got in that band by accident, really. At the time I was playing with Madrigal Live, and then I got a call from our agent saying, hey, there's this band, Men in the Making, their drummer left the band and stole all their money out of their bank account and fled the state, and they're playing tonight at Thudpuckers, and they need you to come down, big panic thing. And I showed up. I thought, well, I'm going to be leaving, I'm going to be doing all this stuff, but I'll join this band and everything. I got locked into them when my daughter was born, basically, but they took me out and showed me their books, and how much money they were making. I said, where's the Beatles wig? Let's go, because they were a show band. They did like impersonations, right? Buddy Holly, Jerry Lee Lewis. And as time went by, we developed a much bigger show, and I kind of would be sitting back there watching them have all the fun, right? And I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I was sort of stuck in Spokane at that time. All the while I'm writing. I'm out playing in a band doing 50s and 60s, a full-on show, and we were super popular in the Northwest for quite a while. And being who I am, I was writing, Harry got back. He'd been in Boston going to school, and he came back, and I started playing him some of my demos because I knew he was a prog rock fan like me, and he really liked what he was hearing. And I didn't know this, but he had gone to school with Adam Holzman, who was the musical director and keyboard player for Miles Davis for like 4 years. That was his big break when he was young. And he now works with Steven Wilson. So one day, Harry comes up to me and says, hey, do you want to go see the Steven Wilson show? I didn't know who he was, really. That I wasn't that familiar with his work and what he had done, but he said, hey, my buddy Adam is playing with him. I've got tickets. You want to go to the Showbox in Seattle and go see this guy, And I'm like, yeah, sure. We go to the show, and, of course, when I met Adam, and we're just talking, having a casual conversation about music. At one point, Harry goes, so did you get that CD of my friend here that I sent you? And he goes, oh, yeah, I got that. Is that you playing keyboards on it? He goes, no, it's him. And he points at me, and I'm like, I didn't know what they were talking about. I'm like, what? You did what you sent? And he goes, well, do you, because they were buddies in college and stuff. So he goes, do you think, would it be cool if you played on a couple of songs on it? He said, when I get back in June, I'll lay down some keyboards on a couple of the tracks. And of course, and all of a sudden in my email from WeTransfer, I've got tracks, I've got stems from Adam Holzman, right? I put on, the first track was, the title track was 11th Hour. I put it on, I hadn't heard one note that he had played on it. And on that particular song, he only played, he played a solo in the center of the song. I'm sitting here and I'm listening, and then all of a sudden, Adam Holzman's solo comes over these speakers, and I'm in here. Yes, that's what I'm talking about. And then a little later on, he sent the tracks for Canvas, which he did organ and Moog and a few other things, and just elevated the songs to another level. And he had played to demos, right? I mean, I had no really intention of those being final tracks. Adam garners an interest in what I'm doing and agreed to play on a few more songs. And at one point, I needed a bass part. And this is where my buddy John Van Hout comes into the picture, and I knew that John was a good bass player, but I had no idea, because I sent this stuff off to him, and it came back to me, and I was just like, wow, So he did a fantastic job, and through that, I just said, I've got this little voice in my head that says, you've got to put this out. You've got to put this music out. You can't just be writing all this music and not put it out, and I wanted it to be something there for my daughters. So that was when I decided I was going to do that, and John came on board to help me. So I started writing more, and because I had a million songs, but I started writing some more stuff with the idea, because Adam had agreed to play more. So I thought, well, I'm going to write some songs kind of, and I had Boat 5, which was, I knew, right up his alley. And then John and I were talking one day, and we're saying, hey, we need a guitar player. And John tells me one day, he says, well, hey, I know this guy named Michael Lewis who just got done doing some recording with John Anderson from Yes and Jean-Luc Ponty from Frank Zappa and Jean-Luc Ponty band. Anyway, so we got in contact with him. He agreed to play on the music, and he got real involved in it and really liked what we were doing. And there was a song that I wrote when I got back from England. I wrote this song that was really influenced by medieval Baroque music. I had this song, and it was called Breaking August, and I had played all the keyboards on it, because a lot of the songs start with me playing everything. And one night I get a phone call, and it's Michael, and he says, hey, how would you like to have these harpsichord parts that you played on here replaced by Oliver Wakeman? As it turned out, I didn't. He reached out to him, and he said, oh, yeah, I'd love to do it. And I ended up meeting him through Zoom meetings and things like that. Absolute wonderful gentleman, great guy. Subsequently, I had him playing now on the record. Now it's a whole new ball game. We worked much harder on it and working more on it, and then I wrote a new song called Mod Frantic, which was really improvising and a spontaneous piece of music that's just born out of nothing, out of guys being together and just playing and seeing what happens. And I found out much later in life that King Crimson did a lot of that. They do it too in front of audiences. Just start playing, come up with something. And I love what Robert Fripp said. He said, every now and then music leans over and takes you into its confidence. I think that is the coolest. And I got Michael involved. Michael was playing guitar on it. I get a call from him. He says to me, this song really needs Billy Sherwood to play on it, you know. He gets a hold of him and he says, yes, he'll play on it, right? Can't even tell you how I felt the day I stripped that into the track. I had a dummy bass line, and he borrowed a few parts from that, but basically he went in there and just really delivered. And then he agreed to do more songs, and sure enough, you know, I sent him the stems. He played on it, and then he's played on 4 songs, I think, on this record. And I got to know Oliver really well through working with him. Actually wrote some stuff with him. Adam was really, really instrumental on the song Something of It and the arrangement of it. There was a song called I'm No One. I had Michael play guitar on that track, but I had some other things. I was trying to get a certain thing, and I ended up using Adam's wife, Jane Getter, who has Jane Getter Premonition. I had her play on that track, and she did some amazing stuff. Like, first of all, her acoustic guitar, she first sent me the acoustic, and it was amazing. It just fit. And there's something I need to say right here too about this record that's uncanny, is the way in which this thing has been done and been assembled. Is that, you know, you've got people in New York, people in London, people all over the world. And I can't really be in the room and act as producer. You know, I can't be in there. In some cases, there were some Zoom things, but most of the time, they would just send me gold. I just worked. I couldn't believe it. I was like, I don't really got to do. I do a little editing, maybe a little cleanup work here and there, but I didn't really have to do much. And this is with all of them. It's almost as if this record had to be made, was going to be made, whether I'm alive or not, whether I'm doing it or not, it's going to be made, you know. I just feel blessed and fortunate and beyond words that, you know, after all this time, here at the 11th hour, you know, I'm actually getting to work with guys of this caliber. It's a dream come true. I mean, and I just want this record, you know, to stand as a chronological thing of my life over the last 40 plus years, you know. And I always felt unfinished, you know, like it was a bucket list thing. You know, I never got to really experience doing the Prog thing the way I wanted to do it, you know. It feels great, man. It really feels good. The very beginning of Madrigal was, in all reality, I had no one other than Peter Hamill and Peter Gabriel and these guys that were in my head, and I was young, and I was on fire to try to do this kind of music. And all of a sudden one day, a friend of mine calls me up and says, we're firing our keyboard player. We're firing our keyboard player, but I think he might be good for you. You should come over. So I came over to the practice house, and I hear this amazing organ, but I actually thought it was a Deep Purple record until I got close enough to hear the other musicians. But the voice, you know, I heard John Lord's voice basically, and I went downstairs and here's Dave, you know, and that started the whole thing really. It was you and me.
Yeah. And not to correct you, but that was Ian Gillan.
Ian Gillan, that's what I meant.
John
Lord is the organ player. Yes.
It's okay. Yeah, that was kind of the no pun intended.
Very, very beginning.
No pun intended, the genesis
of
Madrigal.
It was the genesis of Madrigal. One day we were rehearsing, we're 18, we had this guy in the band by the name of Dan McInerney. And that's not, you know, 5 different people, Dan, Mac, and Ernie, or 3, or whatever. It's Dan McInerney. He came in, amazing guitar player. One day we got done rehearsing and he never came back. That's at least my memory of it is so far long ago. Yeah, so here it is 40 some odd years later, and my buddy Dave, doing the interview here, is mastering Dan's record. And somehow in the conversation, because Dave had come into the universe of what we're doing here and mentioned it to him, I would imagine, and gave me his phone number, and I called him up. Long story short, Dan's on the record. And that's like, we're talking full circle, you know. he's done some great guitar work on the. In fact, all the guitar players on this record, Michael Lewis and Jane Getter, also from another band that was coming up at the same time as Madrigal called Von Dutch. There's a guy named Greg Edgecombe who I also briefly came in contact with, and he came in and worked on a couple of songs. And then a very, very close friend of mine that just recently passed away, Craig Brandt, not only came in and did some guitar work, but sang some background vocals. And I feel horrible that I wasn't able to get this record finished in time for him to see it and hear it. That was a big thing to me. I was really looking forward to that, and I just wish that he would have been able to hear it, In order to compete sonically out there when, these songs were, it's almost like a scrapbook, right? It's like a diary. It's like these songs some of them had a beginning far back as 2012. I think I recorded the drum track on Boat 5 in 2017 or 18. Believe it or not. Well, if you want to get the record, you can get it at themadrigalproject.com, or you can come over to my house and I'll have a whole basement full of them, and most of them used for coasters. No.